Welcome to another miraculous edition of the Corey Margera Show. I'm your host, your Lord and Savior of Eternal Coolness, Corey Margera, and in this episode is going to be about my unpopular opinions on pro wrestling, sports entertainment. This video is basically inspired by Diesel 101 Raw, so I'm definitely going to give him a plug in this video. And honestly, at first I didn't really know if I wanted to do a video like this because I kind of already did to a certain extent with my vanilla midget rant. And I've kind of done that in a few other videos, wrestling related, that I've uploaded in the past. But seeing as how I have not uploaded a new wrestling video in quite a while because, let's be honest, wrestling fucking sucks now. It's fucking bullshit. I mean, I even heard Hell in a Cell was like mediocre at best. I heard one of the best matches of the night was Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins. So, I mean, I have not even been keeping up with the product either. I've been watching Gotham on Monday nights. Have not been watching Raw. Have not been watching NXT. Definitely have not been watching SmackDown. So, yeah, I basically thought that this video would be appropriate, just to give my 2 cents on a lot of things that a lot of people in the YWC enjoy and that I don't, and a few things that I enjoy that the YWC doesn't enjoy. And one of those first things, I just want to get this right off my chest. Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett is fucking awesome. He is a great heel. I don't know why people hate him. Like, literally, like, they can't stand to see him on their TV screen. And I'm like, what the fuck? Jeff Jarrett is an awesome heel. I'm like, who the fuck hates Jeff Jarrett? Seriously. Like, how can you hate Jeff Jarrett? He's like one of the best heels in wrestling ever. I mean, the way he just goes, he just smacks a guitar right in a person's head and shit. And like he on the mic, he's all about like he's the chosen one. Back in 1999, he was like a misogynist. He was like, oh, women should be in the kitchen making dinner and stuff like that, like Deborah and China. And it was just great stuff, man. I mean, like this motherfucker, he's like such a great heel. He knows how to get heat. Yet everyone hates him, and he's not even a bad wrestler. He's actually pretty good in the ring. He's not the best in the ring, but he's definitely a lot better than a lot of other heels that we've had in the past. He's like I mean, I've seen much worse than Jeff Jarrett. Please, he's way better than Cena, for fuck's sakes. I would even say he's better than Orton in a few ways. And I like Orton. Well, I used to like Orton, but now I'm just getting kind of bored with him. But yeah, I mean, Jeff Jarrett was just a fucking great heel. I don't give a shit what anyone says. You can go whatever. But yeah, that's one of my unpopular opinions. I'm not really a Jeff Jarrett fan, but I actually do enjoy his work. I do enjoy him as a heel. He actually got me into TNA during its early days when I used to just want to see him get his ass kicked by anyone, whether it be Raven, Rhino, anyone, Monty Brown, anyone. So Jeff Hardy, back in the early days of TNA, I wanted to see anyone destroy him. And during those days in TNA, AJ Styles, Daniels, Samoa Joe, they weren't really feuding for the NWA title at the time before the TNA title came into play. They were feuding with the X Division title, so they didn't really feud with Jeff Jarrett like that. So, yeah, that's one of my unpopular opinions. I think Jeff Jarrett is fucking awesome. I guess my second unpopular opinion is I think Vince Russo is not as bad as people say he is. Granted, I am not a fan of Vince Russo, but I do think he is Very underrated. I think he is responsible for a lot of things that happened during the Attitude Era. A lot of things that I personally enjoyed. I really loved like how he started to develop the Undertaker's character, and the Undertaker, he had a lot of influence on his character as well. Not to take away from Mark Calloway, and not to take away from guys like Steve Austin, Dwayne Johnson, Mick Foley, Paul Levesque, all those guys who contributed to their characters. But it Vince Russo, he knew how to like keep it going. He knew how to keep it going during that era, and something that he didn't. And even in his time as in WCW, like it was bad, but I mean WCW was at a bad place in general, and I really do think that Vince Russo tried his best in WCW in 2000, and I think that a lot of people, they don't give him the credit that he deserves for trying to take the best of a shitty situation. He basically tried to, he did the shoot at Bash of the Beach 2000. He did a lot of shoots on Nitro that were actually very entertaining, very interesting. Some were just downright hilarious. I remember one time on Nitro, the cat just interrupted him and said, "Yeah, he just like basically they broke the fourth wall," and it was something that you should never do in wrestling. But because this was just so funny, he and um, what did I say? Jerry the King? No, I meant the cat, Ernest the Cat Miller on Nitro. Um, he just interrupted him. He was the commissioner at the time, and he was like, "Vince Russo, who do you think you are? You're the writer. You're not the commissioner. You're not the person with authority. You're the writer." And it was just so stupid because you don't say something like that on a wrestling program. On a wrestling, it's supposed to be like a movie. You're supposed to pretend that this shit is real. You're not supposed to break the fourth wall. You should. This is a performance. This is something people watch to escape reality. Just to see something really cool and really crazy happen. So yeah, that was stupid. That was, but Vince Russo, man, he gets a lot of hate. He was actually responsible for quite a few things that I liked in TNA. The Sting versus Abyss feud in 2006. I actually enjoyed that. I don't care what anyone says. That it was a casket match, I think it was. I think he was also responsible for Judas Messias. No wait, no, that was Dutch Mantel. No, but yeah, he's definitely he wrote some good impacts too. Back in like 2008 and stuff with the Main Event Mafia. Granted, the payoff wasn't good. The payoff should have been much better, but Vince Russo is not as bad as a lot of people in the YWC claim he is. Um, he's willing to kill himself to put on the most entertaining, must-see show possible that he possibly can. So how can you hate a guy for that? And number three, Paul Heyman's overrated. I don't give a shit. I love Paul Heyman. I'm a Paul Heyman guy too. But he's overrated. People in the YWC overrate the fuck out of this man. Paul Heyman is so fucking overrated, it's not even funny. Like, seriously. Are you kidding me? He's just not even like. He's just not even like he could be a good manager and stuff like that. But I remember back in 2002 on SmackDown. Sorry about that, guys. Had to check something real quick. But yeah, I remember back in 2002 on SmackDown when people were praising like how SmackDown was pushing new talent 2002, 2003. And personally, I thought SmackDown was overrated during those years. I did. I was not like a huge I always preferred Raw during 2002 during 2003. And no, not because of Triple H and Evolution, but because most of my favorite superstars, aside from like The Undertaker, who I couldn't stand at the time because his American Badass gimmick was getting so stale. His big evil gimmick was getting so stale. You know, I preferred like the wrestlers on Raw. I was more of a fan of Chris Jericho. I was more of a fan of Rob Van Dam. I was a fan of Goldberg. I was a fan of Stone Cold Steve Austin when he came back to Raw. Shawn Michaels when he came back. I was more of a fan of those guys than anybody on SmackDown anyway. SmackDown. I was a fan of Scott Steiner when he was um, coming to Raw. I was so like I was so shocked that he was coming to WWE like the timing he did, and I always wanted to see a Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Scott Steiner feud. Big Papa Pump versus the Rattlesnake. That would have been a great feud. Or Big Papa Pump versus The Rock or something like that. That would have been a great feud. It wouldn't have been a great match because Scott Steiner, he was at that point he was past his prime. Same thing with Austin and Rock. They weren't as good as they used to be either. But that feud would have been sick, like in the year 2000 or in 1999 or 1998, because those guys are fucking crazy on the mic, man. You got The Rock, who he's like, yo, he's like, I mean, The Rock, obviously, we all know The Rock. He's like, shit, you Rudy Poo candy ass, you know, why don't you know your role? Shut your mouth. And he'll talk all kinds of shit about. He's like, I can't believe what you are. You're a monkey's anus. All kinds of crazy shit The Rock would say. And then you got Scott Steiner, who's crazy as fuck on the mic. He doesn't even give a shit. He'll come out into the ring, not even give a shit if he's scheduled or not. Same thing. Stone Cold Steve Austin, same thing. He's like a rebellious badass. Scott Steiner, he was like a rebellious badass. You know, and it just would have been crazy as hell to see like a Scott Steiner Stone Cold Steve Austin feud or a Scott Steiner Rock feud. But yeah, unfortunately that never happened. I wanted it to happen in 2003 because when Scott Steiner came to Raw, he was feuding with Triple H for a little bit for the world title, and then you had Stone Cold coming back at No Way Out. And at the time, I didn't know about his injuries. Keep in mind, I was still in high school. I didn't really know about like how his injuries were. I just thought he left the company because he was pissed off he had the job to Brock Lesnar. So, and he didn't like the creative. But I really thought if he was coming back to wrestle, like after he fought Eric Bischoff, I wanted to see him and Scott Steiner feud. But obviously that didn't happen. Both were just in no position to really wrestle like they once did. So yeah, that didn't happen. And I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion or not to see a Scott Steiner and Stone Cold feud, but it's just something that I wanted to see. I don't know if people in the YWC wanted to see it, but yeah. But yeah, let me get back to Paul Heyman because Paul Heyman, he's so overrated. I mean, like I like Paul Heyman. He's great. He's a great manager. You know, the original ECW, I loved it. You know, but when he came to WWE, his whole philosophy changed. And he even said this in an interview, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't care for it because it was just, I mean, you had the Magnificent Six as they call it, with Kurt Angle teaming with Chris Benoit versus Edge and Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, and it was just, I mean, Eddie Guerrero and Chavo Guerrero. Why did I say Chris Benoit? But yeah, it was just, it was just like whatever to me. It just, I mean, SmackDown had some great wrestlers: Kurt Angle, Undertaker, you know, Edge and stuff. But I just did not care about SmackDown like that. Their storylines were just so lame. Like I remember the Zach Gowen storyline. I don't know if Paul Heyman was behind that, or maybe it was Vince McMahon. But that shit was just so corny. Like they had Zach Gowen, and they tried to make they tried to make Stephanie McMahon a face, which just I will never ever cheer for Stephanie McMahon ever. And that was another stupid thing they did on SmackDown during that period. And I don't know if Paul Heyman was behind that or not. But again, that's another. I just thought Paul Heyman was overrated. I thought that if he was allowed to just go crazy like he was in ECW, then that would be great. But I thought he was a great manager for Brock Lesnar. He's a great manager in general. He's a great commentator too. He said he didn't like doing commentary. I actually loved him on commentary. I remember Survivor Series 2001 when he was just going crazy on the mic. He was just he. I remember the Battle Royal. it was the immunity battle royal because it was the alliance angle. One of them was going to go out of business, WWF or the alliance, and whoever won this battle royal would get to keep their job for 1 year, and it ended up being Test. And it's so ironic too because after that 1 year, he kept getting fired for like numerous times. He got fired in 2004. Like I think he either that or he got released, and then he got fired again when he came back to the new ECW, and it was crazy. It was, and I obviously he has passed on, you know, and may he rest in peace. I didn't know him, so I can't really you know say anything great or bad about him, but he was okay in the ring and stuff. He was an okay big guy, not the best, but he was okay. But yeah, I mean, but during that match, Paul Heyman and Jim Ross, they were going at it. He was like, Paul Heyman said like the craziest shit. He was like, hey, you better get into that battle royal, Jr., so you can keep your job. And he was just going on and on. And then when Taz came out, because this was the pay per view right after SmackDown, after that now infamous um, pipe bomb, if you will, promo that he did on Vince McMahon on SmackDown. And then at the end of it, he was like, "Look at Taz, look at Taz. He's a little fat, little obnoxious color commentator, and not even a good one." And then Taz just came right into the ring, gave him a Taz mission, choked him out, and then he came out into the battle royal, and JR was like, "Well, I'll be damned, Taz is here." You could just look at Paul Heyman's face. The camera just got a close up on Paul Heyman's face, how shocked he was. And that's how good of an actor Paul Heyman is. He's a great actor. He was just like, ah, like his face was priceless. It was just, it was just, it was hilarious. It was absolutely hilarious. And this is why I just love Paul Heyman. He was like the new Bobby Heenan on commentary. He was just like such a hilarious heel. It was, and to me, I compare. I mean, Jim Ross, good old Jr. He compares Paul Heyman to Jim Cornette. I don't compare him to Cornette at all because Paul Heyman is just way too revolutionary. He's well, not revolution, but yeah, revolutionary to a certain extent. Yeah, he's very new school. Cornette is very old school. So there's not. I don't really compare them that much. They're both opinionated, but I think Cornette is way more opinionated than Paul Heyman ever was. But I would compare Paul Heyman character wise, maybe not in real life, but character wise to Bobby Heenan. Because Bobby Heenan he was another hilarious, charismatic, crazy ass heel. Um, but back in the day, yeah. But it was just funny. Paul Heyman was just a hoot on commentary. He was just crazy as hell, you know. But that I do think he's overrated. I do think a lot of people claim that Paul Heyman is way better than he actually is, and it's the truth. But definitely when Paul Heyman, he's got his eye on something, and he's really like passionate about it, then that's when he's at his best. Because he's not at his best right now when he's managing Antonio Cesaro, or when he was managing whatchamacallit, like a lot of these superstars that just aren't that great. That's not when he's at his best. You can't just put Paul Heyman next to a superstar and expect it to be gold. It's not. That superstar actually has to be fucking worthwhile in the first place. So yeah, that's my unpopular opinion on Paul Heyman. He's not as great as people say he is, but when he can really think of something good, he can deliver. And obviously, this is my fourth unpopular opinion. I already said it anyway. I thought Raw was better than SmackDown during 2002 to 2003 and 4. And I'll tell you why. Because Eric Bischoff was just a great heel general manager. Way better than Stephanie McMahon. He was a great heel. And he was like, it was just interesting to see what Eric Bischoff would do next, with the Raw roulette and stuff like that, which I don't know if that was his idea or not. I don't know. I never heard Eric Bischoff confirm that the Raw roulette was his idea. So if you know it was his idea, leave it in the comments. Or if it was Vince's McMahon's idea, leave it in the comments. But yeah, basically, Raw was just so entertaining. I mean, Kane unmasking for the first time. Like, it wasn't the first time he really unmasked, but this was like the first time we got to see his face. And I just remember him looking like a crazy ass Resident Evil monster. Like when he first done that, he was just so hideous. He was so scary and creepy, and like it was just good stuff, man. The storylines on Raw were better during that era. Evolution was not as bad as people make it out to be. All right, it was actually a good heel stable, but again, I didn't think that it should have existed at a time when Raw had a lot of talent. You had Shawn Michaels returning. You had a lot of great ECW talent on Raw, like Tommy Dreamer, Rob Van Dam. You know, you had Chris Jericho. You had Jeff Hardy. You had a lot of guys that you could really be pushing the ball with. And I know Jeff Hardy was on drugs at that point, but still, it was just you had a lot of star power on Raw. You had a lot of great characters, a lot of great workers, wrestlers on Raw, and Evolution shouldn't have been the main focus. I know Triple H, he wants to be a big heel and stuff like that, and Bischoff, he wants to be a great heel as well. But Evolution at that point you know, was not where I thought it could have been. I did think it was a great launching pad for the careers of Batista and Randy Orton, so it did work in that perspective, but I definitely thought Raw was, definitely very underrated during those years, during 2002, 2003. I loved when Stone Cold came back. I loved when he became co-GM of Raw. I loved when Scott Steiner, um, he was doing Vig Nights of whether he would come to SmackDown or Raw, and he eventually came to Raw. And I was glad too, because it made more sense for him to come to Raw, because Scott Steiner is just too raw for SmackDown. No pun intended. But SmackDown is like a tape show. They have to censor a lot of things. Scott Steiner is not, and plus, seeing Scott Steiner work under Stephanie McMahon just seems kind of cheesy. He would be better working for Eric Bischoff. It would make more sense, especially like seeing their history in WCW and stuff like that. It would just, it made more sense to me. And, that's just one of the reasons why I liked Raw, because, you had Stone Cold, Eric Bischoff going at it as co-GMs. You had a lot of the legends. You had like Rob Van Dam. You had Chris Jericho. You had some really cool young stars as well at the time, back when Rob Van Dam was younger and way more agile than he is today. And yeah, I just preferred Raw over SmackDown during those years. So yeah, that may be an unpopular opinion, because I know the YWC praises SmackDown in 2002, 2003 during that period. But I personally was not a big fan of SmackDown during those years. I did like a few wrestlers. I did wish Kurt Angle was on Raw. I did wish Brock Lesnar was on Raw. Um, I was so glad when The Undertaker went back to his gothic, dark dead man gimmick. But at the same time, I thought he was going to be coming to Raw to get revenge on Kane. I didn't think that he was going to stay on SmackDown. And so, yeah, that I wanted to see Undertaker come to Raw. I wanted to see like what would happen if The Undertaker and Eric Bischoff ever confronted each other. Because I never saw that, and it would just be like interesting chemistry. You never really saw these two stars confronting each other. You had The Rock come back to Raw. He left SmackDown in 2003 for Raw, and he just became an amazing heel on Raw with The Rock concert. You had Goldberg coming to Raw. Raw was just way better during that period. I don't care what anyone says. I really don't. Raw was a better show, had better storylines, better feuds. It was just a more entertaining show than SmackDown was. SmackDown was just, it was you had good wrestling, but that was it. The storylines were terrible on SmackDown. I mean, aside from like the Brock Lesnar Undertaker feud, I can't think of a single storyline from SmackDown up until JBL turned heel. I can't think of a single storyline that was actually good on SmackDown until JBL turned heel. People would say like, "Oh, John Cena was edgier at the time." I never gave a shit about John Cena, so yeah, that doesn't apply to me. But when JBL turned heel on SmackDown, I enjoyed it. And this is gonna lead me to another unpopular opinion on wrestling. I prefer storylines and characters over the actual in-ring work. And the reason I prefer this is because wrestling is fake. It's not fake. It's people actually do take bumps and stuff. They actually do uh, uh, the ring is hard. The ring is not soft. It's not like a bed. It's not all it's just because it looks bouncy on TV, like it looks like a little bouncy on TV doesn't no. The I've actually I've wrestled in an actual wrestling ring before. It is hard. There's wood under there. It's a hard ring. The bounce is, so you won't get hurt as much as like if you're wrestling on fucking concrete floor or something like that, you know, because otherwise we'd be having injuries like every single week if it was a really hard ring. But it's a lot harder than it looks on TV. Trust me. People do take bumps. They do get slammed on that mat. It's not something that you just slam and get right back up. No, it's hard. And I have a lot of respect for people who are actual wrestlers who've worked on their craft and stuff like that. But I'm sorry, I like entertainment more than fucking in ring stuff. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I love a good match. I love a good feud. I love a good match. But how am I supposed to enjoy a fucking match if the two superstars or the two wrestlers are boring as shit? I could care less who wins. It's just, I don't give a shit who wins if two people suck and I'm not entertained by them and I can't follow behind them. I can't relate to them. I can't anything to them. They just suck. They're just bland vanilla midgets or they're boring as shit. They're a bunch of pretty boys. I could give two shits. That's why I lost interest in wrestling in the first place. Because how am I supposed to keep up with a product and be interested in it when all the wrestlers are fucking shit? When they're boring as shit and they suck. They have no personalities. They're not cool. They're not edgy. They're not anything. They just suck. And I will admit I do prefer character development and gimmicks and how cool a wrestler is over their actual in-ring work. I will admit that. History has proven that people would prefer entertainment over actual in-ring quality. Because, I mean, you just look at the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era had some of the worst wrestling matches ever. I mean, it was just nothing but, like, brawls and slugfest and shit like that. Hardcore matches and stuff like that. I mean, you had some good matches in the Attitude Era. But let's be honest, it was more about entertainment. And that's what made wrestling better. Because how the hell are you going to give a shit about wrestling when you don't care about the characters? When you don't care about the wrestlers? Where's the payoff? What are you supposed to be interested in watching? Exactly. You're not interested in watching a show with no payoff, with shitty characters, no character development whatsoever, no gimmicks, nothing cool, nothing badass, nothing entertaining. Nobody telling jokes about the other person like The Rock used to do or Stone Cold Steve Austin used to do. It's like, how are you supposed to get behind a wrestler when they're not even cool? Even guys like Rob Van Dam, who is not good on the mic, he's fucking cool. He's cool as shit. He's like the Johnny Cage. He was like the Johnny Cage, for those of you who are into Mortal Kombat. He was like the Johnny Cage of ECW and later the WWE. Because he was arrogant, he was cocky, he was like, no, he was laid back, and it was just so funny to see how laid back he would be and cocky, and he always had the best in-ring attire too, which Ryback stole. Prior to Ryback, Rob Van Dam had the best ring attire. In my opinion, Rob Van Dam and The Undertaker during his Ministry of Darkness days, you know, that was that was some of the best in ring attire, some of the best costumes I've ever seen in wrestling. And that's what I miss about wrestling too. There's no one with any cool attire. It's just a bunch of faggy, pretty boys and vanilla midgets in fucking speedos. Like, who the fuck wants to watch that shit? Like, serious, I'm being honest here. Who the fuck wants to watch that shit? And if that is an unpopular opinion in wrestling that I have within the YWC, then I'm glad it's an unpopular opinion, because I don't give a fuck what some of you faggots think about that. I'm done here. Seriously, wrestling is about, even some of the biggest experts in wrestling do not care about in-ring quality. You ask Raven, Scott Levy, he's about who puts more asses in seats. And he's right. Who does put more asses in seats? Who's entertaining? Who has good feuds? Who has good chemistry with other wrestlers? Who can actually, not just put on a great match, but who can actually get people interested in watching the show in the first place. You're not going to get that with a lot of these vanilla midgets and a lot of these Daniel Bryans and stuff like that. I'm sorry. Daniel Bryan, his shirt may sell a lot at Hot Topic and Spencer's and on WWE Shop within the niche wrestling community. The niche wrestling community that is not mainstream, which is not popular like it was during the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars and even the Ruthless Aggression Era, the earlier years of the Ruthless Aggression Era. Daniel Bryan is not that popular as a lot of you people say he is. He's not. I'm sorry, he's not. He is not as pop. Like, a lot of these guys, like, this is why I want to see more Bray Wyatts. I want to see more Bray Wyatts. I want to see more Dean Ambroses. I want to see more people like that, or else I'm not going to continue to watch this shit. I'm not going to continue to watch, because why the fuck do I care? All these new superstars fucking shit, with the exception of, like, Dean Ambrose, Bray Wyatt, and Paige. I like Paige. I want to see Paige get a push. And I have not been keeping up with NXT, so I don't know too much about all these new rookies and stuff like that. But give me something that's entertaining. Give me something that's cool. Give me something that's gonna make me want to stop watching Gotham on Monday nights, which is a great show, and I definitely recommend you watch that over Raw. From what I've heard, how shitty Raw has been. But give me something that's gonna make me want to stop watching Gotham, or make me want to tape it so I can watch Raw instead. All right. There's so many other options to watch. You got like Monday Night Football. You got other sports. You have, shows like Gotham. You have shows on like The Big Bang Theory and stuff like that that air on Monday nights. And you got like so many other shows, Sons of Anarchy and stuff like that that air like in the same time and stuff like that. It's crazy. Like, why the fuck WWE, even without WCW or any other wrestling show, why the fuck would they put on such a shitty product? It makes no sense. That's why their ratings are low. Because even without WCW, and the WWE knows this from the New Generation era, the In Your House era, people did not want to watch that shit either. All right? Yeah, you had good wrestling with Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, um, Owen Hart, British Bulldog, 1, 2, 3 Kid. You have stuff. You had good wrestling and stuff like that, but it was like no one cared because the gimmick sucked and there was no edge factor, no coolness to wrestling during the New Generation. I would argue the New Generation was actually cooler than this era. I even did a video about that, the PG era versus the New Generation era. And, honestly, I would take the New Generation era over this shit. But yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, to me, it can be as unpopular, but I will take mic skills, gimmicks like JBL. I remember at the time, I hated President Bush. And just like a lot of you hate Barack Obama now, I hated Bush. Because basically, my cousin, he died over in Iraq. And I hated what Bush was doing to the troops. And to see a guy like JBL, represent a guy who's like a conservative Republican like Bush, he thinks he's so badass. He thinks he's a Republican. He's like the big bully. He can do whatever he wants, you know. He get like the United States thinks that they can control the entire world and stuff like that. You know, that actually made me want to hate JBL. And I used to boo the hell out of JBL, man. I used to love. He was funny too. JBL had his moments of comedy too. He was like you hated him so much. He represents stuff that you hate, but at the same time, you know, he's hilarious. I remember that one time on SmackDown, he was pretending that he was drunk and he was having sex with Godzilla or something like that when they were in Japan. And it was just funny as shit. It was just like, fuck, this guy is so stupid. But you know, that's what you need in wrestling. That's what you need in wrestling. Because literally, who the fuck wants to watch boring shit? Like that's one of the reasons why I never got into Triple H aside from the year 2000. And to a certain extent 2002 and 2003 a little bit, but that's why I never cared about Triple H cuz he can never be entertaining like a Jeff Jarrett or a JBL, you know, or even a Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle was he was hilarious, especially in 2000. I wish he would have kept that nerdy gimmick from that he had from 2001 to 2002, where he was just like this nerdy, patriotic, heroic, you know, intensity, integrity, and intelligence. Kurt Angle, man, I agree with PS Power when he made that video. Like I really wish Kurt Angle would stay with that gimmick instead of like when he after he once he shaved his head, he became much more intense. He became more of a just a wrestling guy. You know, he didn't really have a gimmick anymore until I remember in 2000 was it 2005 when he was trying to stalk Booker T's wife at the time. And then when he came to Raw in 2005, he was starting to get entertaining again because he was like, you know what? He was like, he had Davari as his manager for a little while, and he was like, you know what? I hate the black people, and he was just saying so much outrageous shit. That's what I want in wrestling. I want to see another Kerwin White. I want to see another self-hating character in wrestling. I want to see an Uncle Ruckus in wrestling. I want to see another Kerwin White. With Chavo Guerrero, when he was Kerwin White, when he was trying to pretend to be a middle class white guy, I want to see more of that in pro wrestling. God damn it. I want to see more of it. More of it. And that's my take. Those are my unpopular opinions on wrestling. You know, I'll take entertainment over a 5-star match any day of the week. I don't give a shit what anyone says. That's my video. I'm out. Later.